In my book chapter, I talk about dying before battle, trusting what the story is not about. If you've ever been about to get into a fight, you know the feeling. It's hard to breathe. It's hard to think straight. It's hard to find your words. Your opponent's words are like a quiver of arrows carefully aimed to shoot down your case. What goes on in a courtroom at trial is nothing short of war. Trial is not for the faint of heart. It's a battle. And if you're not prepared for battle, you're dead. What's going to be one of your greatest weapons that will counter one of your greatest fears, and if it's not your greatest fear, it should be, is how are you choosing to tell the story of your client? In February 2017, my friend, Los Angeles trial attorney Brian Kim, died in battle. But Brian did not lose the war. His first loss as a trial attorney, his eyes opened to the new landscape of the battlefield before him. The moment Brian stepped into that courtroom, he quickly realized that no fancy suit, sweet lawyer talk, or case that he learned in law school was going to save him. The defense attorney was a towering man, imposing man, who had a reputation for having tried 100 cases and who was the president of the defense bar. He made it very clear that he was out to destroy Brian and his team, and that is exactly what he did. And when the dust settled and Brian heard the jury's unanimous verdict in favor of the defense, his heart sank into the pit of his stomach. He had been beaten, and it was all over. And Brian rushed outside of the courthouse. He found himself walking around a labyrinth of winding bends and corners until he found an empty place of refuge. And the ground's littered with cigarette butts. And when it finally looked like the coast was clear, Brian talks about the tears of shame that begin to collect in his eyes as he paces about aimlessly. He's confused. He's embarrassed. And nothing is quite like the sickening gut punch of defeat, having a jury tell you to go kick rocks after putting your life, your heart, and your soul into a trial. But those tears were not just about losing. Brian was devastated, not just because he had lost, but because he didn't tell the real story, the client's story. And he felt pretty bad about that. Brian shared with me that he said his brain begins to do strange things when he experiences failure. Since he was a child, he talks about how failure has been something he has not been able to accept. His brain replays pictures over and over again as if dissecting defeat into image slices with the precision of a sushi chef. Some would call that obsession or anxiety. But to Brian, he says that's his way of trying to move forward so that he can reflect with purpose. As Brian sits on the bench outside of the courthouse, he begins to reflect on what had just happened. The words of a juror kept bludgeoning out any coherent thoughts in his head, though. Dog and pony show, the juror had said as she walked out of the courtroom. The juror was a middle-aged woman with a soft-spoken voice, and her words had cut deep. Brian realized at that moment that trial was a credibility war, and he had lost. The jury had walked away not knowing the truth and not knowing his client at all. Brian had gotten in his own way and talked about how he allowed himself to come first before the client. The woman's words forever stained him, the juror's words, and created the catalyst for this beautiful death and a rebirth. I'm picturing the samurai warrior preparing for battle. He begins his ritual of embracing his own death before he even puts on a single plate of armor. And one of the ways samurai warriors can die what they call a happy death is to embrace the belief that they are dying for a cause that is greater than themselves. Okay, this might make sense for a samurai warrior, but what the hell does it mean to die before battle for the trial lawyer? Getting out of your own way for sure, but also making the most important decision that a great director, and that's you, can make in the choice of the right casting and the right telling of the character that is your client. One path takes you one way, and the other path takes you the other way. Is your client the victor, or are they the victim? That's the game-changing decision that helps you not only frame your entire case, not only have the right conversation with your jurors that helps define a powerful and compelling picture of what invisible injury looks like, and not just maximize the crap out of your damages if you're a PI lawyer or getting your client to a not guilty if you're in the world of criminal defense. It helps you trust at the greatest level to get out of your own way. That's dying before battle. And when Brian Kim realized what his story was not about, a grandmother in a slip and fall case in pain, his world in the legal profession after this punishing defeat changed dramatically. I've seen it. Brian has gone to win multi-million-dollar successes in the courtroom since this day. I've worked with him. And a great deal of it had to do with the way he chose to look at his client. What would it look like when Brian Kim made a different choice about this woman? What if he defined for the jurors the story of the grandmother who is not her pain? Who she is the strength of trying to overcome her pain to the best of her ability, with hope, with strength, and the scariest three-letter words I talk about that there ever is in the courtroom, joy. What if he told that story? I'm going to be talking about that in the next segment. Meanwhile, trust the story, the right story of your client. Always the victor, never the victim. Check out my book.